Hello, everyone. My
You're
name is
42.
Pally, and I'm an
You're a
OG
grandpa. What
2016
the fuck?
DVD nerd who means Trapper and Bill. How you doing, Larry? Mwah. Anyway, today I'm going to be talking about the
Bro, they're out and
controversial
out. Fucking
truth
cameo.
about tunneling in Dead by Daylight. So let's jump right into it, shall we?
Okay.
So first, what I want to do is I want to define tunneling. A lot of people have their own definition of tunneling, and most times those definitions are not only wrong, but they often end up being a form of coping from the person saying it.
I will say this. A lot of people do genuinely think that tunneling is just one thing and only one thing. For me, there's like a couple, right? There's like hard tunneling, blatant tunneling, like just like hatred for a player. And it could just be because like people are fucking weird, bro. Like the whole like epidemic and shit that's happening right now with Arella Rose and people like tunneling her just because they're playing that character. It's fucking crazy to me, bro. There's that, right? Hard tunneling. I'll throw that in the sense of like the same kind of like criteria as someone who just maybe has been shitting on the killer, right? Looping them, flashlight saves, maybe like head on. They just can't seem to kill them. And the killer's just fucking angry at that person and they don't even care about the match anymore. They just see red and they're so tunnel visioned and they just want that person, right? Straight hard tunneling. And then there's kind of like strategic tunneling, kind of like you need to tunnel. If you're at like 2 gens and you don't have a kill yet, you need to find the closest person or the person that has the most hook stages and get them out of the game. That way you can literally give yourself a literal chance at the game. If you don't do it, you will 100% lose the game. But if you do it, you have a shot. Now, is it cool being the person that's tunneled? No, but it's kind of like all in the eyes of the beholder, right? Me personally, I do think, I don't care who or whatever you're getting, they're getting 2 hooks. I don't know. Yeah. See, like there should be like a sense of equality, right? There should be. In this case scenario, though, like I'm saying, for me, I like getting tunneled. But as a content creator, I like getting tunneled. If I wasn't a content creator, I don't think I would like being tunneled as much. Does that does that make sense a little bit? For me, I'm like, cool, bro. Chases are interesting. Chases can be used for shorts, can be used for videos, can be used for footage. I would rather be in 100 matches where I get tunneled every single game and I have more chases than I do gens the entire game and fucking sit there and do nothing. You know what I mean? Like, that's fucking boring. But as a regular player, you just might like to do that, you know, get in, do your objectives, and then get out, you know? So, like, it's kind of just how you perceive the game. But at the same time, it's very hard to, I don't know, be okay with just getting, like, only looked at and not anyone else being looked at. So it's already for everyone.
Never look what you could have done differently. I'm not
if I
saying
transfer
that's everyone,
Rose
but it's a large amount of people.
IRL, I should tunnel my wife because she, what the
anything
fuck?
is tunneling these days. They could get unhooked, healed, sit a gen for 30 seconds, and still say they were tunneled. I've literally seen this happen. And throughout the last 9 years of playing Dead by Daylight, since the beta, I've seen it all. So for me, I can break tunneling down into 4 separate definitions based on different situations. So starting with number 1, let's talk about accidental tunneling. And when it comes to accidental tunneling, the most common occurrence of this that I find is usually
you just run into them, bro.
Chasing someone else, and out of the blue, you run into this person who just got off the hook as their teammate is maybe healing them or something, where you happen to be chasing.
Yep.
It could be near the hook they were on, or it could be anywhere else, but the fact is they were there, they're injured. Why ignore the opportunity?
Exactly. Okay,
for them,
I love that. I love that.
To come across them, and you know what? That's fine. It's smart to go after that person. It happens, and that's okay. But that's what I would consider accidental tunneling. Moving on to number 2. Desperation tunneling. And what is desperation tunneling? Well, it is exactly what it sounds like. It's tunneling out of desperation. Picture this. You're playing a relatively low tier M1 killer like Trapper or Pig on, say, Badham Preschool. You're down to 1 gen left,
bro.
with 2 over...
Bro, Badham Preschool is the most survivor-sided map in Dead by Daylight. Don't let anyone or their mother or their grandmother or anyone at the family function tell you that Badham Preschool and all of its variants are not the most survivor-sided maps in Dead by Daylight.
for 50% in repair
above
progress.
any
And
other
you don't
thing,
even
bro.
have anyone
I
dead on
don't
hook
care,
yet.
man.
We've all been there.
That
And
map
no
is
matter
so
how
fucking
skilled
broken.
you are, it could happen to anyone. You find someone and you hook them for their second hook, and as soon as they get unhooked, you go after them again to get the kill. You do this because you desperately need someone dead.
Yep,
You just
yep,
lose.
okay, that's
And
what
if
I
you
was
don't do
saying
this,
earlier.
You have absolutely no chance of even getting a 2K unless the survivor's hard throw. It's high risk, high reward, because if they don't have any anti-tunnel perks, well, you just turn the game into a 3v1, and that means even if they get that last gen done, you have a chance of a 2K or even a win. And I think most times this kind of tunneling is usually accepted by the community. Now, granted, that doesn't mean it's always.
This is the tunneling that is used every single game in. Okay, not desperation tunnel. Like it's kind of like a form of like desperation tunneling, right? When you get into comp, you immediately want as little players as possible, as you would in like any Dead by Daylight game, right? It's like the best way to play like efficiently and have the best chance of winning. Dwindle the number down of survivors, less people on gens, easier for you to have an easier game. In comp, they immediately just look at one person, the first person they see, they just always tunnel them out because they desperately need them out. So in a way, like this is like exactly comp tunneling.
Accepted. Moving on to number 3, we have survivor-induced tunneling or teammate-induced tunneling. And what is teammate-induced tunneling? Well, I'll give you a quick example. You hook someone, you walk away from the hook, you find a couple of gens with progress, you kick them, but you don't find any survivors. They've decided to hide and immerse. Well,
Dude,
time is always
like,
against the killer, so if the killer doesn't find anyone, they'll usually go back to the hook as soon as they hear the unhook notification. The issue is, once they get there, the only survivor you find purely because of grunts of pain and a blood trail
is the
person
one
who was
that's
just
injured.
unhooked
Yep.
Because the other person who unhooked them decided to go back to hiding and immerse. So the killer has no choice but to either waste time or just hook the survivor they can see. And so
Okay, personally, I don't know if I would per se call this like survivor induced tunneling. I feel like this should fall in line with like accidental tunneling, right? It's not that you want to tunnel this person, it's just they got unhooked, you kicked the gen, you came back to the area where you last seen a survivor or any like survivor activity, and there just so happens to be the one person that is injured and that just got off of the hook. Purely coincidental, accidental, you know? I wouldn't say it's like survivor induced, it's kind of, you know?
So because
I would throw that in that category.
Aggro, their teammate
crowd
got
control,
tunneled.
power
And I
over
think
the
this is one of those
control
situations
of the
where
match.
survivors don't really see this perspective of the killer, and they just think the worst possible thing about the killer as a person. Moving on to definition number 4, and this is the
Look, have
one
you found
most
lobby?
people have a problem with: hard tunneling. And hard tunneling is
Nope,
exactly
still
what
waiting.
it sounds like. It's the tactic of repeatedly going out of your way to go after one survivor and only one survivor, ignoring all other survivors, ignoring generators until that survivor is dead, until they are out of the game. The flip side to this is that most times, unless the survivors are just hilariously bad or overly altruistic,
You lose.
This also means the killer is probably throwing the game. Of course, there are exceptions, and if the killer happens to get this one survivor out extremely early, sometimes before even a single gen has been done, more times than not, the game is already over before it even began. This might be
bro,
the
if
only
you lose a
definition of
survivor
tunneling where I
at
would
5
personally
gens,
sympathize
your
with
team has
complaints
lost the
of
game already.
survivor who was
You might as
tunneled
well give up.
most of the time. So now that we know the definitions, this brings me to the question of how often tunneling actually happens. And to be honest, it's a really tricky
Be honest here. How many of you guys tunnel in your games? Be honest.
question to answer, because while
Both?
I do have my own data, at the end of the day, it's all anecdotal because I can't speak to everyone else's experience.
Yep.
However, other content creators, including Scott Jund, have done similar experiments over the years and have come up with very similar results. My experiment is the reason it's taken me a bit longer between videos this time, and I'll also provide a link to the Google Doc.
I wonder
in the
how long it took him to get this
description
much
below with time ranges,
information, though.
days, maps, specific killers, if you're curious to see the actual data. You'll also clearly see in this document the days that I had off or the days I didn't stream when you look at it. And in case you're wondering, no, I barely ever escaped. My escape rate for this entire experiment was very, very low. So my data is based on an experiment that I conducted over a 2-week period. And the only reason it took me 2 weeks is because I don't have time to do this every day, and I just used the time that I had, and I wanted to get a specific amount of games in to include within my data. I did my experiment completely solo queue in Anon mode, so no one can look at my profile or have any real reason to tunnel me. Just a normal Bill player with an ugly sweater and no anti-tunnel perks. And during this 2-week period, I played 150 solo queue games at different times
Holy
in
shit.
the Eastern time zone, ranging from early afternoon.
Bro, that's dedication, bro. 150 solo queues?
Call it
Fuck.
demon hours. It's also worth mentioning that I did this entire experiment in 1v4 while 2v8 was a thing, which many people say makes 1v4 infinitely more sweaty than normal. Out of all 150 of these games that I played, either myself or a teammate was hard tunneled in 13 games. Now, if you're wondering what that means, that's literally 8.6%, give or take a decimal point or two, of the time during this experiment. And every single time, the person to be tunneled was the first person to be hooked, and it was very obvious that the killer had just spawned in with the purpose of tunneling out the first person they caught. But again, less than 10% of the time.
Comp tunneling.
I was also tunneled as a result of my teammate.
You know, I will say too, it's like, okay, tunneling in Dead by Daylight is a massive problem. And part of the reason why it's a massive problem, I feel like, is because the fact that they have things like comp DBD, right? They have all these tourneys. They have all this like ranked aspect of the game in which they show you and they like put on a pedestal like, hey, you have to play like this if you want to be good at the game. So newer players come into the game, they see things like this. Like people tell them, oh, you know, if you want to get better at the game, maybe watch some comp DBD. You can see how a lot of these players, like these are the best of the best players that have thousands of hours in the game. Just watch their gameplay and see how they play. And of course, it's like monkey see, monkey do, right? They're going to mimic how they play, and they're going to go and like comp tunnel out every single game. And then it just kind of like adds to the problem of tunneling. And they just think it's like efficient gameplay.
Games, which is 7.3%.
So I really do think like comp DBD had
of the total
a really like negative effect on like the overall health of the game.
Because they either refuse to take chase anywhere except a broken
even though personally I find it
just
fascinating
to take aggro, and the killer was simply making the smart play. This did not happen to my teammates because, well, to be honest, I will always take aggro. I love to be chased. It's my favorite part of playing Survivor because holding M1 is just boring. Another thing you might notice with the data is there is a direct correlation to tunneling when survivors bring a map offering they know full well is egregiously unfun for the killer to play on. Now again, I'm not going to say my experiment and the data that came from it are a definitive answer to how often tunneling happens, but given that other creators have done similar experiments, it's a pretty consistent indicator that tunneling isn't as rampant as people say it is. It seems to be the few bad experiences that just seem to stick and mentally outweigh the positive experiences that we have. One thing I can confidently say is, for some people on DBD Twitter who claim they get tunneled in every single game, if you truly are getting tunneled in every single game, I personally find it very hard to believe that it's out of nowhere. It just doesn't seem plausible. And believe it or not, while doing an experiment on tunneling, the biggest issue wasn't actually killers tunneling. The biggest issue, and stop me if you've heard this, was my teammates giving up on hook, usually on their very first hook. So what about the killer's perspective on tunneling? How does the killer's perspective factor into all this? Well, as a killer, it's no secret that there is just more pressure on you throughout most of the game than there is on the survivors. And this
every player should find their own playstyle, but you can watch videos to improve your playstyle.
There are 4 survivors and potentially 16 survivor perks with 5 generators to repair, and only 1 killer with 4 perks and up to 12 hook states to achieve. Every second you spend chasing 1 survivor is 3 seconds of gen time, and oftentimes that spreads across 3 separate generators. The entire flow of gameplay puts a heavier amount of pressure on the killer. So why do I bring this up?
That's like so true too, because it's like, it goes back to the conversation of survivors. Like, you play a bad game of Survivor, no one says anything, right? But you play a bad game as killer, and you get absolutely fucking flamed by the survivors, by the community, by everyone. Like it's almost like, in a way, if you're bad at killer, it's significantly more like worse than if you're just bad at survivor. You know what I mean? Because they're like, oh, well, you're playing killer. This is the power role of the game. If you're bad, you're just fucking ass. Go play Minecraft. Go do something else. Play a different killer. Just go to Survivor or something like that, right? If you play Survivor, it's like, oh well, killer tunneled, or he was playing this killer's super strong. What was I supposed to do? Or like X, Y, and Z fucking thing. I don't know, man. It's
because
it's really
just
stupid.
One example of something that survivors aren't really thinking about when they're berating and insulting the killer in endgame chat over even the most innocent tunneling. Another thing that goes along with the killer's perspective,
and then you try and play efficiently,
that a lot
and you're a fucking scumbag.
Players have when it comes to tunneling, or even things like slugging and camping. For example, how often have you had a survivor commit to a 95% generator in your face after you hit them and you're in the weapon wipe animation? It happens to everyone. And you know what? There's no fundamental difference between a survivor committing to a gen in the killer's face and a killer tunneling a survivor out of the game. Some may even consider it worse because survivors have 5 gens to do while the killer has 12 hook states to get. One thing I would like to ask survivor players, or rather survivor players who predominantly only or mostly play survivor, if you're at 1 gen left and you see a gen that's 95% done, and the killer is doing his best to put pressure on it, but he can only do so much because he's got no mobility and he's an M1 killer, say he's Trapper. Are you going to go start a new gen across the map? Or are you going to make sure you get that gen done because it's faster and it's closer to being done and it just makes more sense? You're probably going to go after the generator that's closest to being finished because it makes the most sense strategically. So why would you expect the killer to do anything different? Earlier in the video, I mentioned survivor-induced tunneling, where immersed survivors don't want to take aggro and force the killer to tunnel the only one they can find. You'll see a lot of survivors still expect the killer to waste valuable time searching for people who don't want to be found, instead of chasing the only person they have a location on, and sometimes the people who were immersing will even go as far as insulting them for it when they make what is objectively the right play.
Bro, it honestly really like is just a lot of like, okay, we're showing you. It honestly is a lot of just like survivor entitlement, you know? They're like, okay, we're playing the weaker role. Why are you sweating? Even though we are putting an immense amount of pressure on you. You know what I mean? It's like it. Personally, I feel like to even start to form an opinion in Dead by Daylight, one, you need to have minimum 1,000 hours played. If you don't have minimum 1,000, like this is fucking like bedrock, bro. Literally fucking bedrock. If you don't have minimum 1,000 hours in Dead by Daylight, any and everything you say about the game has no basis, has no standing. Your opinion is completely void, bro. Like, I like, call me like a bad guy for saying it. If you have less than 1,000 hours, you know nothing about the game. You don't even start to like begin to fully understand the game until you're at least like 12 to 1,500 hours into the game. Realistically. And like you damn sure don't know you damn sure don't know enough about both roles and every single thing that goes on about everything inside of the game to have like a valid and a non-biased opinion about everything.
Lack of self-awareness, and again, as I said earlier, it's the old dark side Phil ideology where you blame everyone but yourself when it was completely preventable by you and you alone. Now that I've gotten through all that, let's talk about anti-tunnel perks, specifically the issue with anti-tunnel perks, and more specifically decisive strike, off the record, borrowed time, and of course, shoulder the burden. I'll get this out of the way immediately.
Bro, with the babysitter buff, it's fucking insane,
let's also make it clear what anti-tunnel perks are actually for. Anti-tunnel perks aren't meant to stop tunneling. Anti-tunnel perks are meant to deter tunneling, and there is a stark difference between prevention and deterrence. And that's something we need to keep in mind. But you're probably sitting there and wondering,
Esther now?
why
bro,
bring up
it's so
anti-tunnel
good.
perks? Well, to be honest, the truth is, and I know many killer players can relate to me here, when it comes to decisive strike and off the record specifically, most of the time, I'm hit with these perks when I'm not even tunneling. Survivor
no, that's so fucking facts, dude. Genuinely
often use them as an offensive tactic rather than the intended purpose.
Okay, someone another idiot running to my face.
And a lot of the time, survivors
it happens a lot.
Both decisive strike and off the record, meaning they can just wave off the record in your face with absolutely no downside because they have decisive strike to
especially
bail them
if they
out as
get
a second
healed.
layer of protection. It's honestly quite boring. And I don't even want to get into how shoulder the burden's a thing, and it's a perk that was released that only seems to buff survive with friends instead of solo queue for some reason, which makes absolutely no
solo queue players are running that shit, man.
Like I said, for the most part, I have no issue with anti-tunnel perks existing in their current form, and I have no issue with the base kit endurance you get for being unhooked. I think the only change I would make to these is to make it so if you have a currently active anti-tunnel perk or you have endurance, you no longer have collision with the killer or your teammates, which would mean you wouldn't be able to use your endurance to body block a teammate when the killer is actively trying to go after someone else. And before anyone wants to complain in the comments, if tunneling really is that big of a problem, if it's really happening that often, if that's really why you're running anti-tunnel perks, you should have absolutely no issue with not being able to use them offensively. And on top of that, if you really don't want to be tunneled, get away from the killer if he's trying to chase someone else.
Okay, my only like sort of like I wouldn't say like problem. My only really like real like nitpick with that is I don't know if no collision with other survivors and the killer would probably be the best thing. As kind of like a thing like on top of anti-tunnel perks, right? Because then if you are the one that's tunneled, yes, you can't go body block for other survivors, but that kind of like leaves you free to do like a bunch of other like survivor techs, right? Like let's just say for instance, like window teching, right? Everyone knows you bring like a key, or I don't really know how it goes nowadays. I think right now the number one like non-collision perk that people use to get like window techs off like efficiently is dramaturgy, right? Vault to window, killer's vaulting, you swing back around, you pop dramaturgy, you get non-collision for like 2 seconds. And if I have OTR and I'm fully healed, OTR lasts for like almost 2 minutes, something like that. What is it, like 90 seconds? So something crazy like that, right? So that means for like 90 seconds, I can freely do window techs. And if you're playing against a very like skilled player, this is going to do more harm to you. And now look, it goes back to if the killer's like chasing you, right? And he sticks to you, then that basically he's doing that to himself, right? And he's going to lose a match. I understand, but like, I don't know.
So having said all of that, what are some
I don't know what I wanted to get out of that. I just wanted to say
the truth is
I think
there's no perfect solution.
It like promote like a lot of like window teching and tough chases for the killer. Make it even worse.
Is always going to exist, and it kind of always has.
Let's finish our video.
They're insanely imbalanced a lot of the time and have an abundance of completely safe
theater mode this motherfucker?
So even a mediocre survivor player can just waste a ton of the killer's time with little to no effort, and the killer's got to make up that time somehow. The best thing behavior can do is provide incentive for killers to not tunnel. They have to make it worth it spreading hooks and going after separate survivors. Similar to what I said in my slugging video. Incentive is everything, and behavior has, for all intents and purposes, been removing or nerfing things that incentivize going for separate survivors. I'll go ahead and give you a few examples. Barbecue and Chili had its blood point stacks removed.
Yep.
Embrace was nerfed. Pain Resonance, heavily RNG based, also nerfed. Huntress Lullaby.
Ruin,
okay,
nerf,
perk, but it's a hex totem. You basically have to run
Call
a
of Brine, nerf, overcharge, nerf, basically like any generation perk,
this
nerf.
Isn't even based off separate survivors, just hooks in general, so that doesn't even count. The only perk I can really think of that's heavily incentivizing spreading hooks right now is No Way Out, which is admittedly something a lot of killers use. But other than that, there's nothing really incentivizing killers not to tunnel and turn the game into a 3v1 as quick as possible. Combine that with the amount of pressure killers have on them from the very beginning of the game and how long a single chase against even a mid-level survivor can be with the use of exhaustion perks and pre-dropping the abundance of safe pallets on most maps.
Like 30 seconds to a minute, roughly.
And even then, tunneling really isn't all that common. The only solution is to balance the gameplay loop around hooks so killers don't feel so damn pressured all the time. Of course, you'll always have that minority of toxic killer nerds who will just want to tunnel every game for sport, just like you have toxic survivor nerds who just want to bag at every pallet and make the killer miserable every single game. And there's not really a lot you can do about those people, but again, those are the minority.
Yeah, it's just like people just love to play like that. Like people genuinely just love to play like very like annoying for like some random reason. And it's cool to play annoying, right? It's totally fine. Teabag at every pallet, teabag at every single exit gate, teabag at every single like 360 you land or like hatchet that someone misses throwing at you, right? Cool. But when you get like tunneled after like flashlighting the killer or basically like berating the killer, showing off front of the killer, don't play victim when you were sitting there and not playing efficiently, you know?
Like Otstarva and Hens have both said and shown that
like you can't get a flashlight, say teabag in front of the killer, and then be in the middle of Kandahar,
the game
get knocked, and then cry wolf.
In its current state, and that's a behavior problem, not a community problem. When it comes right down to it, tunneling isn't a black and white issue. There's a lot of nuances to it and a lot of misunderstandings from both sides when it comes to the cause and effect of tunneling. On top of that, much like slugging, tunneling doesn't just immediately translate to wins. There is a strategy to tunneling, and if you tunnel the wrong person or tunnel at the wrong time, you could be throwing the match. And I think that right there is why it's not really as common as people on places like DBD Twitter would like you to believe.
Okay. My take on this is, or like my general thoughts really are, a lot of people on DBD Twitter are like, kind of like I was saying earlier, have like less than 1,000 hours played in Dead by Daylight. Like they might just not know. Dude, it's so hard to take what people say and not think it's rage bait, right? Because like I was saying a second ago, a lot of people on DBD Twitter, they haven't been playing the game since its release. They haven't been playing the game for years. They might have just started playing it in like the past year or two, which, as you guys know, okay, you guys may not know this, right? But DBD right now is the literal best it has ever been in its history. A lot of people on DBD Twitter have not seen how bad DBD was and the road it took to get here and how bad things just used to be for survivors and for killers and just the whole community in general. So much more toxicity, so much more broken things in the game, so much more hackers, so much more bugs. But like they see the game how it is now, and they try and just like comment on the game now and say like, oh well, like you should fix this, you should fix this. Like bro, like everything just like takes time. Like granted, they can, if they only pursued a lot of these issues, they could be fixed a lot sooner. Yes, but that's just like not realistic, right? Now they're all about like making money, making skins and everything. Like it's kind of like grown bigger and bigger. So things like this kind of get pushed down. Just like, let's say for instance, like Call of Duty, Overwatch, things like that, like these big, like major games, right? They sell all these skins, but they leave in like a lot of bugs and it leaves the community sitting there like, hey, what the fuck's going on? Call of Duty, big crazy hacker situations. They're like, hey, where's our anti-cheat? They laugh. You're still going to play our game every year. Behavior is kind of moving into that direction, right? They're moving into the direction of like, okay, we're big enough now that we know you guys aren't going anywhere.
Tunneling wouldn't exist and killers would never feel like it was necessary, which is a feeling that stems from how lopsided the balance in DBD is. And I'm not just talking about survivors versus killers when I say balance. I think this also applies to S-tier killers versus basically every other tier of killer. Sure, Nurse can handle anything you throw at her, but then you have to take into account that a killer like Trapper exists somehow in the same game as Nurse, which makes no sense. You might comfortably beat a team as Nurse, but in all likelihood, you're going to be drowning in sweat against the very same team as Trapper.
So bad.
Of course, I'm using two extreme ends of the spectrum here, but you get the idea. There's no constant plane of difficulty that dictates if or when tunneling is a necessary tool to utilize. At the end of the day, as I said, it's up to behavior to balance the game in a way where spreading hooks is realistic, because right now it just isn't. Now, I know I'll have some random person in the comments that wants to say,
well, actually, I 4K every single game without perks or add-ons with Huntress, and I never tunnel or camp.
Dude, I fucking hate those comments, dude. Dude. And the people who make these comments, right? Like, oh man, I 4K easy all my games. You guys are probably just bad. They're the same people that have like less than 500 hours in the game and they're playing like absolute like plumbers, bro. Like in the lowest of the lowest MMR. Of course, everyone is gonna be terrible. Everyone is newer players. Killers have a power role. Like, it's not until a person has at least like 500 hours to maybe like 1,000 hours that they even feel semi confident in a chase against a killer, right? So when they're newer players and you're in the low MMR states and you're a new killer yourself, you're going up against other new players, they're gonna like feel so scared, not know how to like loop anything efficiently. And as the power role, even if you play shit, you're going to absolutely dominate every single game. I, like everyone, started Dead by Daylight the same exact way. When I first started playing Dead by Daylight, I was scared to do anything. I was crouching around everywhere. I was like self-carrying in the corner of the map. I used to, bro, back in 2017. I'd hide in a bush, wait for killers to always pass by, get on a gen, rat a lot. I just didn't want to die. That's how like players are for like at least the first few 100 hours. You don't know anything. You don't know like the killer's power exactly. You don't know how it works. You don't know how it doesn't work, his capabilities. So like, of course, you're going to shit on them when you're a killer, bro. They don't know what to do. So like to say like, that's your argument. How, bro? That doesn't reflect the other like 90, 80, whatever like percentage of it is of players that have like over 1,000 who are like already like accustomed to the game and already like know how to play against killers, even a little bit, you know, and like loop efficiently as like a survivor. I don't know. Not about argument. Wanting something better is not bad.
You just need to get good.
And that's when I would say, dude, shut up. Stream it to Twitch, prove it. I will watch the whole thing and I will point and laugh when you can't do it. In any case, nerds, I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it. I'm sorry it took me a little longer. I did have an experiment to do. I think I've really started to develop an enjoyment of the whole video editing thing. If you would like to catch me live, trapping survivors like it's going out of style, you can find me over at twitch.tv/pallylive. And if you like what you saw here today in this video, I'd really appreciate a like. And if you hit that subscribe button, it would be even better. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been Pally, and I will see you all in the next one.
Bro, I actually like really love that video. I'm subscribed to this guy. I genuinely like love that video.
He's yapping in the fog, never lost for words. Looping like a legend, though it's all a blur. Content so crisp even when he's late. Imposter games, chaotic but great. Where's